The morning sun peeked through the curtains as Lily opened her eyes. Today was finally here, her wedding day. For a moment she lay still, letting the realization wash over her. After 5 years of loving Thomas, today they would become husband and wife. She reached for her phone and smiled at his message. "Can't wait to see you at the altar." "Last night as just boyfriend and girlfriend." In the room next door, her mom and sister were already up, the smell of coffee drifting under Lily's door. She heard their quiet laughter, trying not to wake her. It was thoughtful, just like they'd been throughout the entire wedding planning process. Lily and Thomas hadn't wanted anything extravagant, just a meaningful ceremony with the people they loved most. They'd chosen a small historic church perched on the cliffs overlooking Pinewood Bay, the same town where they'd met during college, where Thomas had first asked her out after bumping into her at the library, spilling her books everywhere. "Knock, knock," her sister Abby called softly, opening the door with her hip while balancing a tray with tea and toast. "The bride needs her strength." "I can't believe it's today," Lily said, sitting up. "After all the planning and waiting, and now you're about to become Mrs. Henderson," her mom said, following Abby into the room. Her eyes were already misty. "Your dad would have been so proud." Lily felt the familiar pang whenever they mentioned her father. He'd passed away 2 years ago, too quickly, a heart attack that no one saw coming. The wedding planning had been bittersweet without him, but Thomas had suggested a special candle ceremony to honor his memory. "He'll be with us today," Lily said, squeezing her mom's hand. Across town, Thomas was experiencing a completely different morning. His best friend and best man, Peter, had insisted on a pre-wedding breakfast with the groomsmen. The local diner was filled with their laughter as they teased Thomas mercilessly. "Last chance to make a run for it," joked Peter, who'd been Thomas's roommate in college. "Not a chance," Thomas replied, unable to stop smiling. "I've been waiting for this day since our 3rd date." It was true. He'd known early on that Lily was different from anyone he'd ever met. She challenged him, supported him, and made him laugh even on his worst days. When his startup business had nearly failed last year, she'd been the one to help him rework the entire business plan, staying up late into the night, believing in his vision even when he'd started to doubt it himself. The hours flew by in a blur of activity. Lily's hair and makeup, the photographers arriving, the flowers being delivered. Slightly different than what they'd ordered, but still beautiful. Small hiccups that couldn't dent the joy of the day. Thomas arrived at the church early, greeting guests with his parents. His grandmother, who had traveled all the way from Ireland despite her fear of flying, hugged him tightly. "She's a good one, your Lily," she whispered. "You hold on to her." "That's the plan, Gran," he said, kissing her cheek. "Forever." As the ceremony time approached, guests filled the small church. The weather had cooperated perfectly, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze coming off the ocean. Through the windows you could see the waves crashing against the cliffs, a stunning backdrop for their vows. In the small room at the back of the church, Lily stood in her dress, a simple but elegant design she'd fallen in love with instantly. It wasn't the most expensive one she'd tried on, but when she'd put it on, she'd just known. Her mom had added tiny pearls to the trim, pearls that had been on her own wedding dress. "You look beautiful," her Uncle Dave said, the man who would walk her down the aisle in her father's place. His voice caught. "Just beautiful." The music began and Lily took a deep breath. This was it. Thomas couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him. Later, guests would comment on how he seemed to forget anyone else was in the room. The way his eyes filled with tears when he first saw her. The way he mouthed "wow" as she approached. Their vows were personal, written by them in coffee shops and late nights over the past months. Thomas spoke of Lily's strength, her kindness, the way she saw the best in everyone. Lily promised to always be his biggest supporter, to choose him every day, to face whatever life brought them together. "I knew you were the one when you stayed up all night helping me study for finals. Even though you'd already finished yours," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've always put others first. I promise to spend my life making sure you know how treasured you are." Lily spoke of their future, the family they hoped to build, the adventures they planned to take. "With you, even ordinary days feel special," she said. "I can't wait for a lifetime of ordinary days with you." When they were pronounced husband and wife, their kiss was met with cheers and applause. Lily couldn't stop smiling as they turned to face their loved ones for the first time as a married couple. The photographer captured them walking back down the aisle, their faces glowing with happiness. Those photos would later become treasured mementos for reasons no one could have imagined at that joyful moment. Outside the church, guests threw flower petals as they emerged into the sunshine. There were hugs and congratulations, laughter, and a few happy tears. The reception was set to begin in an hour at a nearby restaurant overlooking the water. "We did it," Thomas whispered, pulling Lily close for another kiss. "You're stuck with me now." "Exactly as I planned," she teased back. As the guests began making their way to their cars, Thomas suddenly pulled Lily aside. His grandfather had given them a wedding gift that morning, the keys to his prized vintage Corvette, a beautiful blue convertible that Thomas had always admired. "I have an idea," he said, his eyes bright with spontaneity. "The reception doesn't start for an hour. What if we take a little detour? Just us? Where to?" Lily asked, intrigued. "You know that spot on North Cliff, where we had our first real date?" Lily smiled at the memory. It was a stunning lookout point where they'd watched the sunset after dinner 5 years ago. Thomas had been so nervous that night, wanting everything to be perfect. They'd talked until the stars came out, and he'd finally gathered the courage to kiss her as the waves crashed below. "We could go there for just a few minutes," Thomas suggested. "Have a moment to ourselves before the reception craziness. We'll be quick, no one will even notice we're gone." "I love that idea," Lily said. "Let's tell Peter and Abby so they know where we are." Thomas quickly found his best man, who was chatting with some college friends. "We're going to take 20 minutes to ourselves before heading to the reception," he explained. "Can you let people know we'll be there soon?" "Sneaking off already?" Peter teased, then nodded. "Of course. Take your time, everyone will understand. You deserve a moment alone." He tossed Thomas the keys to the vintage car. "Just don't be too late. Your grandmother is already asking about the food." Lily found her sister and explained their plan. Abby hugged her tightly. "That's so romantic," she said. "Go enjoy a few minutes of peace before you have to talk to 100 people about your honeymoon plans." Hand in hand, the newlyweds slipped away to where the beautiful blue convertible was parked. Thomas held the door open for Lily, carefully helping arrange her dress. "Mrs. Henderson," he said with a grin as he slid into the driver's seat. "I like the sound of that," she replied, reaching for his hand. They drove away from the church, waving to a few guests who noticed their departure. The wind whipped through Lily's carefully styled hair, but she didn't mind. There was something perfect about this moment. Just the two of them, the open road, the beginning of their life together. Neither of them could have known that their wedding day joy would soon turn into a tragedy that would shock everyone who had just witnessed their love. That the beautiful cliff where they shared their first kiss would become something else entirely in less than an hour. As they drove along the coastal road, windows down and music playing, they were simply two people deeply in love, starting their future together. Thomas reached across to hold Lily's hand, lifting it to his lips for a kiss. "Best day ever," he said, his eyes briefly leaving the road to meet hers. "And it's only just beginning," she replied. The blue convertible rounded the curve toward North Cliff, the ocean sparkling in the afternoon sun, their future stretching out before them like the endless horizon. The blue convertible hugged the curves of the coastal road as Thomas drove them toward North Cliff. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind in her hair and the warmth of the sun on her face. She couldn't remember ever feeling this happy. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, glancing at her as they approached the turnoff to the lookout point. "Just how perfect today has been," she said, opening her eyes to look at him. "How lucky I feel." Thomas squeezed her hand. "I'm the lucky one." The car slowed as they turned onto the gravel path that led to the cliff's edge. It wasn't an official lookout point, more of a local secret. A flat stretch of land that jutted out over the ocean, offering breathtaking views of the coastline. They'd discovered it by accident during their first months of dating, getting lost on a drive. It had become their special place over the years. "Looks like we have it all to ourselves," Thomas said as he parked near the edge, about 15 feet from where the land dropped away to the rocks and water below. He turned off the engine and suddenly they could hear the waves crashing and seagulls calling overhead. "Just like our first time here," Lily said, remembering. "Except now you're my husband." The word felt new and wonderful on her tongue. Thomas leaned over and kissed her softly. "And you're my wife." They got out of the car, Thomas carefully helping Lily manage her dress. She kicked off her heels, letting her bare feet touch the sun-warmed grass. They walked hand in hand to a flat rock near the edge that made a perfect natural bench. "Remember when we came here after I got the job offer in Boston?" Thomas asked as they sat down. "How worried we were about doing long distance." Lily nodded. "I cried the whole way home. And then your boss offered you the remote position the very next day," Thomas continued. "I still think the universe was looking out for us. They had faced their share of challenges. The year apart when Thomas's mother got sick and he moved back home temporarily to help care for her. The fight they'd had about whether to spend their savings on a house down payment or invest in Thomas's business idea. The heartbreak when they'd thought they were expecting a baby, only to discover it had been a false positive. Through it all, they'd somehow found their way back to each other, stronger than before. "I want to tell you something," Thomas said, his voice growing serious. "Something I've been thinking about for a while." Lily turned to face him, curious. "That sounds ominous," he laughed. "No, it's good. At least I hope you'll think so." He took a deep breath. "I know we said we'd wait a couple years before trying for a family, get established in our careers first." Lily's heart skipped. They'd talked about children often. Both wanted them eventually. "But lately," Thomas continued, "I can't stop thinking about what our kids might look like. If they'll have your eyes or my terrible sense of direction." He smiled. "I don't want to wait anymore. Life's too short, you know. I want to start our family sooner rather than later. What do you think?" Lily felt tears welling up. "I think," she said slowly, "that you just gave me the best wedding present possible." She'd been having the same thoughts but hadn't wanted to pressure him. "I want that too. So much." The joy on Thomas's face made her heart swell. He pulled her close and they sat there for a long moment imagining their future together. "We should probably head to the reception soon," Lily said eventually, glancing at her watch. "They'll be wondering where we are." "Just 5 more minutes," Thomas pleaded. "It's not every day I get to have my new wife all to myself on a beautiful cliff." Back at the reception venue, guests were starting to arrive. The restaurant had transformed its ocean view patio into a romantic setting, with string lights and wildflower centerpieces. A small band was setting up in the corner, testing microphones and tuning instruments. Peter checked his watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, frowning slightly. "Still no sign of them?" Abby asked, coming to stand beside him with a glass of champagne. "Not yet," Peter replied. "How long does it take to visit a lookout point?" Abby shrugged. "It's their wedding day. Maybe they're celebrating." She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. Peter laughed. "In a vintage convertible on a cliff? I don't think so. Have you tried calling them?" "Twice, straight to voicemail." Peter wasn't worried yet, just slightly annoyed. Thomas was usually punctual to a fault. They probably just lost track of time. Or maybe the car broke down. More guests arrived, filling the space with chatter and laughter. Thomas's grandmother cornered Peter, asking where the Newlyweds were. Lily's mother kept glancing toward the entrance. "Should we start serving appetizers?" the event coordinator asked, looking concerned. "We're already 15 minutes behind schedule." "Give them 5 more minutes," Peter decided. "Then yes, start the food." On the cliff, Thomas and Lily were lost in conversation, making plans for their honeymoon in Italy the following week. Neither noticed the small cracks beginning to form in the ground beneath the car, about 10 feet from where they sat. "Oh, I almost forgot," Lily said suddenly, reaching for the small purse she'd brought with her. "I have something for you too." She pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to Thomas. "A wedding gift. Open it." Thomas carefully unwrapped it to reveal a vintage pocket watch. He opened it, his expression softening as he read the engraving inside. "For all our moments together. Past, present, future." "It was my grandfather's," Lily explained. "Dad kept it and Mom gave it to me after he passed." "I had it engraved for you." Thomas looked at her, his eyes full of emotion. "It's perfect," he said. "I'll treasure it always." As he leaned in to kiss her, a strange sound made them both pause. A low rumble, almost like distant thunder, except the sky was perfectly clear. "What was that?" Lily asked, looking around. The rumble came again, louder this time. Thomas stood, pulling Lily up with him. "Not sure," he said, frowning. "Maybe." The ground beneath them suddenly shifted, just slightly but enough to make them stumble. Lily grabbed Thomas's arm to steady herself. "Thomas?" she said, her voice rising with concern. He was already moving, pulling her away from the edge. "Let's get back to the car," he said firmly. "Right now." They hurried across the grass, Lily holding her dress up as they moved. The rumbling grew louder, more insistent. Small pebbles on the ground began to vibrate. They were almost to the car when the first large crack appeared, a jagged line shooting across the ground between them and the vehicle. "Thomas!" Lily cried out, pointing. The crack widened as they watched, dirt and small rocks tumbling into the growing gap. More cracks spiderwebbed outward, the ground groaning like a living thing. Thomas looked from the car to the path leading back to the road. The cracks were spreading quickly, cutting off their escape route. The convertible was shifting slightly as the ground beneath it became unstable. "We need to get further back," Thomas said urgently, turning Lily away from the car. Away from the edge. They ran, hand in hand, as the rumbling became a roar. The solid ground they'd stood on just moments before was breaking apart, huge chunks beginning to separate from the mainland. At the reception, Peter's phone buzzed. He pulled it out to see a text from Thomas. "Something's wrong at the cliff. Ground moving. Call help." His blood ran cold. "Abby!" he shouted, already moving toward the exit.
"Call 911.
"Thomas and Lily are in trouble." On the cliff, Thomas and Lily had reached what seemed like stable ground about 30 yards back from where they'd parked. They stood, breathing hard, watching in horror as large sections of the cliff face began to fall away. The beautiful blue convertible tilted precariously as the ground beneath its front wheels gave way. For a moment it seemed to hang in the air, and then it tumbled forward, disappearing over the edge with a distant crash. "Oh my God," Lily whispered, clutching Thomas's arm. "If we'd been in the car." Thomas pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "No signal," he said, looking at the screen. "We need to get back to the road, find help." The ground shuddered again. A new crack appeared, this one between them and the path to safety. "Jump!" Thomas shouted, leaping across the narrow gap and turning to help Lily. She gathered her dress and jumped, Thomas catching her and pulling her to safety. The crack they'd just crossed widened rapidly behind them. "We're going to be okay," Thomas said, holding her close. "We just need to keep moving." But as they turned to run, the ground shifted violently beneath them. Lily stumbled, crying out as her ankle twisted. Thomas caught her before she could fall, lifting her into his arms. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Hold on." With Lily in his arms, Thomas pushed forward, searching for stable ground as the cliff continued to break apart around them. The roar was deafening now, dirt and rocks raining down as massive sections of earth separated and fell toward the ocean below. Behind them, the spot where they'd exchanged their private wedding gifts disappeared into the abyss. Ahead, the path to the road was their only hope. Thomas ran, his new wife clinging to his neck, her wedding dress billowing around them like a cloud. The ground continued to shake, but he kept his balance, his focus entirely on getting them to safety. Neither of them saw the new crack forming directly in their path, until it was almost too late. Thomas saw the new crack forming just in time. He skidded to a stop, his dress shoes sliding on the loose dirt, Lily still in his arms. The fissure opened wider by the second, a dark line cutting them off from the path to the road. "We're trapped," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumbling earth. Thomas set her down carefully, keeping one arm around her waist to support her injured ankle. They stood together, watching as the stable ground around them shrank with each passing moment. The cliff was breaking apart in chunks, sections falling away into the churning ocean below. "There has to be another way," Thomas said, scanning the area desperately. His eyes landed on a narrow strip of land to their left that still seemed intact. "That way. If we can get to those trees, we might be safe." Lily nodded, her face pale but determined. "Let's go." They moved carefully, Thomas supporting Lily as she hobbled alongside him. The wedding dress that had seemed so perfect in the church now tangled around her legs, the delicate fabric catching on rocks and brush. Behind them, the spot where they'd just been standing crumbled away. Lily tried not to look back, focusing instead on the trees ahead that promised safety. They were maybe 30 yards away. It might as well have been miles. At the reception venue, panic had set in. Peter had shown Abby the text from Thomas and she'd immediately called 911. Now they were both in Peter's car, racing toward North Cliff with the police and fire department on the way. "Try calling him again," Peter said. his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he took the coastal road faster than was safe. Abby dialed Thomas's number for the 5th time. Still straight to voicemail. She tried Lily next. Nothing. The location sharing app, she said suddenly. Lily and I use it. I can see where they are. She pulled up the app on her phone, her hands shaking. The little blue dot showing Lily's location was exactly where they feared, at North Cliff. But it was moving, if slowly. They're alive, Abby said, relief flooding her voice. They're moving. Peter pressed harder on the gas. Hold on, you two, he muttered. We're coming. On the cliff, Thomas and Lily had made it about halfway to the trees when the ground shifted again. Harder this time. Lily cried out as she lost her footing, her injured ankle giving way. Thomas caught her before she fell, pulling her upright. I've got you, he said, looking into her eyes. We're going to make it. A deafening crack split the air. The narrow strip of land they were crossing suddenly dropped several inches. They both stumbled, grabbing onto each other to stay upright. Run! Thomas shouted. Don't stop. Hand in hand, they pushed forward, Lily ignoring the searing pain in her ankle. The ground was tilting now, the whole section sliding slowly toward the cliff edge. It was like trying to run up a slide that was getting steeper by the second. The trees were just yards away when Lily's dress caught on something, a jagged rock protruding from the ground. She jerked to a stop, nearly pulling Thomas down with her. I'm stuck, she cried, tugging at the fabric. Thomas turned back, his eyes widening as he saw a new fissure forming between them and safety. He dropped to his knees beside Lily, pulling a small pocket knife from his suit pocket. Hold still, he said, sawing at the delicate fabric of her dress. The material parted, freeing her but leaving a large piece still attached to the rock. As they stood to run again, the ground gave a violent lurch. The entire section they were standing on was separating from the mainland, like a raft breaking free from shore. The gap between them and the trees widened to several feet. We have to jump, Thomas shouted over the noise. Lily looked at the growing gap, terror in her eyes. I can't. You can, Thomas insisted, squeezing her hand. We'll do it together. On 3. The chasm continued to widen. It was now or never. 1, 2, 3. They ran the few steps they had and leaped together, arms outstretched toward safety. For a moment they were suspended in air, the gulf beneath them seeming to stretch forever down to the jagged rocks below. Thomas landed on the other side, his momentum carrying him forward onto solid ground. He turned instantly, reaching back for Lily. She hadn't made it as far. Her hands scrabbled at the edge, her body dangling over the abyss. Thomas lunged forward, grabbing her wrists. I've got you, he grunted, straining to pull her up. Give me your other hand. Lily swung her free arm up, her fingers finding purchase on the rough ground. Together, they managed to get her up and over the edge. They collapsed on the solid earth, breathing hard, holding each other tightly. We made it, Lily gasped, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. We actually made it. Thomas kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I told you we would. They lay there for a moment, the reality of their narrow escape washing over them. Behind them, the section of cliff they'd been on just moments before tilted further and then broke away completely, thundering down to the ocean in a cloud of dust and debris. Let's get to those trees, Thomas said, helping Lily to her feet, just to be safe. They made their way to the small grove of wind-twisted pines that marked the beginning of more stable ground. From here, they could see the road in the distance. Thomas pulled out his phone again, hoping for a signal. 1 bar, he said, relief evident in his voice. I'm calling Peter. As he dialed, Lily sank down with her back against a tree trunk, her ruined dress pooling around her. The beautiful gown was now torn and dirty, the hem completely gone on one side. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose, wild strands blowing in the wind. She'd lost her shoes somewhere along the way. She started to laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that bubbled up from deep inside her. What's so funny? Thomas asked, looking up from his phone. Look at us, she said, gesturing to his torn suit, the mud streaking both their clothes. Some wedding day, huh? Thomas's face broke into a tired smile. Hey, they say rain on your wedding day is good luck. What do you think cliff collapses mean? That we're going to have one hell of a marriage, Lily replied, her laughter fading into a softer smile. If we can survive this on day 1, we can survive anything. Thomas moved to sit beside her, phone still to his ear. Peter's not answering. I'll try Abby. He paused, looking out at the destruction behind them. I still don't understand what happened, That cliff has been there forever. Lily shook her head, equally confused. It was like it just gave way all at once. Peter, thank God, Thomas suddenly exclaimed into the phone. We're okay. We're both okay. We made it to the trees on the east side. Yes, a huge section just collapsed. I don't know what happened. Okay, we'll stay put. He hung up, turning to Lily. They're 5 minutes away. Police and fire department, too. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Some honeymoon preview, huh? Hey, Italy has to be less exciting than this, Thomas joked, putting his arm around her. At least we have a story to tell our kids someday. Lily smiled at the thought. After their conversation earlier, the idea of their future family seemed even more precious now. They'll never believe it. Would you believe me if I told you my parents almost died right after their wedding when a cliff collapsed under them? Thomas asked with a grin. Fair point. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the adrenaline slowly leaving their systems. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. You know what's weird? Lily said suddenly. Right before it happened, I thought I heard something. Not just the rumbling, but something else. Like a popping sound, Thomas frowned. I didn't hear anything like that. It was quick. Like firecrackers almost, she shrugged. Maybe I imagined it. Before Thomas could respond, they heard car doors slamming nearby. Moments later, Peter and Abby burst through the trees, faces frantic with worry. Oh my God, Abby cried, running to them. We thought... She couldn't finish the sentence, just dropped to her knees and threw her arms around Lily. Peter clapped Thomas on the shoulder, his relief evident. What the hell happened, man? I have no idea, Thomas replied, shaking his head. 1 minute we were just sitting there talking, and the next, emergency vehicles were arriving now, red and blue lights flashing through the trees. Paramedics followed shortly behind Peter and Abby, carrying medical bags and a stretcher. As the professionals took over, checking Lily's ankle and Thomas for injuries, Peter pulled out his phone. You need to see this, he said grimly, showing them the screen. It was a news alert. Breaking massive cliff collapse at North Point. Witnesses report seeing vehicle go over edge. They think we went down with the car, Thomas realized. Everyone at the reception is freaking out, Abby added. Your mom passed out, Lily. They're bringing her to the hospital to be safe. Lily looked stricken. We need to let everyone know we're okay. Already on it, Peter assured her, typing rapidly on his phone, sending updates to the whole wedding party. As the paramedics helped them toward the waiting ambulance, Thomas kept his arm firmly around Lily's waist. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the changed landscape. Where their special place had once been, there was now only a jagged wound in the earth. So much for our reception, Lily said sadly. Thomas kissed the top of her head. We'll have the biggest anniversary party ever to make up for it. What neither of them knew, as they were carefully loaded into the ambulance, was that their ordeal was far from over. And what had seemed like a terrible accident would soon reveal itself to be something far more sinister. 3 days after what local news was calling the wedding cliff miracle, Lily sat in a hospital bed flipping through TV channels. Her sprained ankle was elevated on pillows, wrapped in a clean white bandage. Aside from cuts, bruises, and the ankle injury, she'd escaped the ordeal remarkably unharmed. Thomas had suffered even less, just some scratches and a bruised rib from their desperate leap to safety. Anything good on? Thomas asked, walking in with 2 cups of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. He handed one to Lily before settling carefully into the chair beside her bed. Just more coverage of us, Lily said, gesturing to the screen where aerial footage showed the massive section of cliff that had fallen into the ocean. It's weird being news. Their story had gone viral overnight. Local news had quickly given way to national coverage. The Newlyweds who had escaped death by seconds on their wedding day. Their families had been fielding interview requests nonstop, though both Lily and Thomas had declined to speak publicly yet. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow, Lily said, taking a sip of the coffee and making a face at the taste. Just in time to miss our flight to Italy. Their honeymoon had been postponed, of course. Between Lily's injuries and the ongoing investigation into the cliff collapse, international travel was out of the question. Italy will still be there in a few months, Thomas assured her, reaching for her hand. Besides, I think we've had enough excitement for a while. A knock on the door interrupted them. Detective Karen Walsh stood in the doorway, her expression serious but kind. She'd been assigned to investigate the cliff collapse and had already interviewed them twice. "Sorry to bother you again," she said, stepping into the room. "Do you have a minute?" Thomas nodded, making room as the detective pulled up another chair. "We've had some developments in the investigation," Detective Walsh began, her voice measured. "I wanted to share them with you personally before you hear about it elsewhere." Lily muted the TV, turning her full attention to the detective. "What kind of developments?" "The Geological Survey team has completed their preliminary assessment," Walsh said, pulling out a tablet and swiping to bring up some photos. "They've determined that the cliff collapse wasn't natural." Thomas leaned forward. "What do you mean wasn't natural?" The detective turned the tablet to show them. The screen displayed close-up images of rock and soil samples, along with diagrams of the cliff face. "These are drill holes," she explained, pointing to circular impressions in the rock, strategically placed throughout the collapsed section. "And these," she swiped to another image, "are traces of commercial-grade explosives." Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "Explosives? You mean someone did this on purpose?" Detective Walsh nodded grimly. "The collapse was engineered. Someone deliberately weakened that section of cliff to cause it to fall." Thomas stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. That's attempted murder. Someone tried to kill us? We don't know yet if you were specifically targeted," Walsh cautioned. "But given the circumstances, it seems likely." Lily felt cold despite the warm hospital room. "The popping sounds I heard," she said quietly, "right before it started. Could that have been?" "Possibly detonators," the detective confirmed. "The explosives were placed to create a chain reaction. Once it started, gravity did the rest." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. "But why? Who would want to hurt us?" Detective Walsh closed her tablet. "That's what we need to figure out. I need to ask you both some difficult questions. Is there anyone who might wish you harm? Anyone who would benefit from your deaths?" The question hung in the air, so absurd in its severity that neither of them spoke for a long moment. "We're not rich," Thomas said finally. "There's no life insurance policy worth killing for. We don't have enemies. What about your work?" Walsh pressed. "Any disgruntled colleagues, business rivals, clients?" Thomas shook his head. "I run a small tech startup with my partner Carl. We're just getting off the ground. And Lily works in graphic design, mostly freelance." "Wait," Lily said suddenly. "What about the Westfield project?" Thomas looked at her sharply. "You think this could be connected to that?" Detective Walsh leaned forward. "What's the Westfield project?" Thomas sighed, sinking back into his chair. "It's a contract we've been working on for months. Software for a major financial firm. There were some irregularities I noticed recently in the code." "What kind of irregularities?" Walsh asked. "Backdoor access points," Thomas explained. "Ways for someone to get into the system undetected. I thought they were mistakes at first, but they were too sophisticated. Too deliberate. And who would have put them there?" Thomas hesitated. "That's the thing. Only 2 people had access to that part of the code base. Me and Carl." Lily reached for Thomas's hand. "You think Carl could have?" "No, that's crazy. He was at our wedding. He left right after the ceremony," Thomas remembered. "Said he had a family emergency." Detective Walsh was taking notes now. "Carl's full name?" "Carl Reeves," Thomas said. "We've been friends since college. Started the company together 3 years ago. And these backdoors in the code, what could someone do with them?" Thomas's expression was grim. "With the right knowledge? Siphon millions from Westfield's clients without being detected. It would look like random system errors until it was too late." "When did you discover this?" Walsh asked. 2 weeks ago," Thomas replied. "I've been quietly investigating, trying to figure out if it was really Carl or if someone had compromised his credentials." "Does he know you're onto him?" Thomas shook his head. "I didn't think so. I haven't confronted him yet." "I wanted proof first," Detective Walsh stood. "I need you to tell me everything about Carl Reeves. And I mean everything." The next day, Lily was discharged from the hospital. They decided to stay with her mother rather than return to their apartment. The idea that someone had deliberately tried to kill them made nowhere feel safe. Detective Walsh had officers stationed outside the house. "Just a precaution," she'd said, but it did little to ease their fears. "I still can't believe Carl would do this," Lily said as they settled into her childhood bedroom that evening. "You've been friends for so long." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed staring at his phone. The detective said they found a lot of unusual financial activity in his accounts. Large cash withdrawals, a plane ticket to Mexico purchased 3 days ago. That doesn't prove anything, Lily argued, though her voice lacked conviction. No, but this might, Thomas said, turning his phone to show her. I've been going through old emails. Look at this one from 6 months ago. The email was from Westfield's CEO to both Thomas and Carl, discussing payment terms for their contract. One line was highlighted. Upon successful implementation, the final payment of $4.2 million will be transferred to your company account. That's a lot of money, Lily said. More than we've ever seen, Thomas agreed. And according to our partnership agreement, we split everything 50-50. So Carl would get half. Over $2 million, and unless I wasn't in the picture anymore, Thomas said quietly. Our agreement has a clause. If one partner dies, the other inherits their share of the business. Lily felt sick. So if you had died in that cliff collapse, Carl would have gotten everything. The full payment, complete control of the company, and no one to expose what he'd done with the backdoor code. The doorbell rang downstairs, making them both jump. They heard Lily's mother's voice, then Detective Walsh's distinctive tone. Moments later, footsteps on the stairs. The detective appeared in the doorway, another officer behind her. Her face told them everything before she spoke. We found something at Carl Reeves's house, she said, holding up an evidence bag. Inside was a receipt from a hardware store dated 2 weeks earlier. The items purchased: industrial drill bits, wire, and an electronic timer. He's gone, Walsh continued. Cleared out his apartment, emptied his bank accounts. We've issued an alert at all borders and airports, but he could be anywhere by now, Thomas finished. Walsh nodded grimly. There's more. We found searches on his computer for methods to cause landslides and cliff collapses going back 3 months. And this. She held up another evidence bag containing a folded map of the coastline. North Cliff was circled in red. He knew we'd go there, Lily whispered. It was our special place. Everyone knew that. The timing wasn't coincidental either, Walsh said. He didn't just want you dead. He wanted you to die on your wedding day when your life insurance policies would have just taken effect. Thomas looked confused. We don't have life insurance. Actually, you do, Walsh replied. Policies for $1 million each were taken out 6 months ago. The beneficiary for both is listed as your company, Horizon Tech. I never signed up for life insurance, Thomas insisted. The signatures look legitimate. But we're having them analyzed, Walsh explained. It appears Mr. Reeves may have forged them. Lily leaned back against her pillows, trying to process it all. So he planned this for months. Took out insurance policies we didn't know about. Studied how to collapse a cliff. And then just waited for our wedding day. The perfect crime, Thomas said bitterly. If it had worked, everyone would have thought it was a tragic accident. 2 newlyweds in the wrong place at the wrong time. We'll find him, Detective Walsh promised. Every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for Carl Reeves now. As she left, Thomas sat beside Lily on the bed, pulling her close. I can't believe I trusted him, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All these years. He was at our engagement party. He helped me pick out your ring. You couldn't have known, Lily said, resting her head on his shoulder. No one could have predicted this. Outside, darkness had fallen. The officer stationed in front of the house was visible through the window, a reassuring presence. What happens now? Lily asked quietly. Thomas kissed the top of her head. Now we help them catch him, and then we figure out how to start over. Neither of them knew that Carl Reeves was much closer than anyone suspected, or that he wasn't done with them yet. A week passed with no sign of Carl. The police had frozen his accounts, issued warrants, and plastered his face across every news channel in the country. Thomas and Lily remained at her mother's house, their lives in a strange limbo. They should have been honeymooning in Italy. Instead, they were jumping at shadows and sleeping in shifts. Thomas spent his days combing through the company's code and files, looking for anything that might help track down his former friend and business partner. He'd discovered more backdoors in their software, each one cleverly hidden. He's been planning this for at least a year, Thomas told Detective Walsh during her daily visit. The earliest backdoor I found was coded last February. Lily's ankle was healing, but her sense of security wasn't. She found herself checking the locks multiple times each night, startling at unexpected noises. The knowledge that someone had meticulously planned their deaths had shaken her to her core. We need to move forward, she told Thomas that evening as they sat in the kitchen. Her mother had gone to bed early, exhausted by the constant tension. "We can't live like this forever, waiting for him to be caught." Thomas looked up from his laptop. Dark circles underlined his eyes from too many late nights reviewing code. "What do you suggest?" "Let's go back to our apartment tomorrow," Lily said firmly. "Start cleaning up the mess he left in the company. Salvage what we can." Thomas hesitated. "The police think it's safer here." "They can watch our apartment just as easily," Lily argued. "I need to feel like we're fighting back, not just hiding." After some discussion, Thomas agreed. They would return home the next day with police protection still in place. Detective Walsh wasn't thrilled with the plan but understood their need for normalcy. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Carl Reeves is still out there and he's already shown how far he's willing to go." The next morning, Thomas and Lily packed their few belongings into her mother's car. The officer assigned to protect them followed in a separate vehicle. The drive to their apartment building was tense but uneventful. "Home sweet home," Thomas said with forced cheerfulness as he unlocked their door. The apartment felt both familiar and strange, like returning to a place you've only seen in dreams. Mail had piled up on the floor beneath the mail slot. A plant on the windowsill had died from lack of water. Everything was exactly as they'd left it the morning of their wedding, yet everything had changed. Lily moved through the rooms, opening windows to let in fresh air. "It feels good to be home," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Thomas set up his laptop on the kitchen table. "I'm going to head to the office later to get some files. You should stay here with Officer Reynolds." "Actually," Lily said, "I want to come with you. I don't want to be alone." "You won't be alone. Reynolds will be right outside. Please, Thomas. I'll feel better if we stick together." He couldn't argue with that. They'd both been feeling the same way. Safer when they could see each other, touch each other. Know for certain the other was okay. The office was located in a small business park about 20 minutes from their apartment. As they pulled into the parking lot, Thomas noticed something odd. "The lights are on," he said, frowning. "No one should be here." Officer Reynolds, who had driven them, immediately went on alert. "Stay in the car," he instructed, reaching for his radio to call for backup. But before he could make the call, a figure appeared at the office door, Carl Reeves, looking disheveled but smiling as if greeting old friends. "Thomas." "Lily," he called, waving casually. "I've been waiting for you." Officer Reynolds drew his weapon. "Carl Reeves, police. Put your hands where I can see them." Carl's smile didn't falter. He raised his hand slowly, still looking directly at Thomas. "We need to talk, partner. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." "There's nothing to explain," Thomas said through the car window. "You tried to kill us." "A misunderstanding," Carl replied, his voice eerily calm. "Come inside." "I can prove it wasn't me." Officer Reynolds was on his radio now, calling for backup. "Sir, get on your knees and place your hands behind your head." Instead, Carl reached slowly into his pocket. "I just want to show you something, Thomas. Evidence that will clear everything up. Don't move!" Reynolds shouted, his gun trained on Carl. Time seemed to slow down. Thomas saw Carl's hand emerging from his pocket, holding something small and black. Not a gun, a flash drive. "All the answers are right here," Carl said, still unnervingly calm. "Just take a look." What happened next unfolded in seconds. Carl took a step forward. Officer Reynolds shouted another warning. Carl made a sudden movement and Reynolds fired. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the parking lot. Carl crumpled to the ground, the flash drive skittering across the pavement. Chaos followed. More police cars screaming into the lot, officers securing the scene, paramedics rushing to Carl's side. Thomas and Lily were hustled back to their apartment by different officers, while Reynolds stayed behind to give his statement. "He's alive," Detective Walsh told them later that evening. "Shot in the shoulder. He's under guard at the hospital." "Did he say anything?" Thomas asked. "About why he came back?" Walsh shook her head. "He's not talking yet. But we found something interesting in his car. Plane tickets to Venezuela leaving tonight. And this." She held up an evidence bag containing the flash drive. "Our tech team is analyzing it now." The next morning brought answers. Detective Walsh arrived early, looking tired but satisfied. The flash drive contained detailed plans for the cliff collapse, she explained, sitting at their kitchen table, along with emails between Carl and someone named Vincent Dawson. "Who's Vincent Dawson?" Lily asked. CFO of Westfield Financial, Thomas answered, recognition dawning on his face. The company we were building the software for. Walsh nodded. It appears they were working together. Dawson would provide inside information about high-value accounts, and Carl's backdoor code would allow them to siphon funds without detection. So Carl wasn't working alone, Thomas said quietly. No, and according to their communications, Dawson was getting nervous about the plan. He thought you were getting suspicious, Thomas. He pressured Carl to take care of the problem before the software went live. Lily reached for Thomas's hand across the table. So Dawson is the one who wanted us dead? Both of them did, Walsh corrected. But Dawson provided the resources, the knowledge about explosives, the equipment. Carl just carried out the plan. Have you arrested Dawson? Thomas asked. Walsh smiled grimly. This morning, he was trying to board a flight to Singapore. We found $3 million in cash in his luggage. The relief that washed over Thomas and Lily was palpable. For the first time since the cliff collapse, they could breathe freely. There's something else, Walsh continued, pulling out her tablet. Carl's been talking since we confronted him with the evidence. He's trying to cut a deal by giving up everything on Dawson. She swiped through some photos, stopping on one that made Thomas's blood run cold. It showed Carl at North Cliff drilling into the rock face. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 days before the wedding. He admitted everything, Walsh said, how he studied geological weaknesses in the cliff for months, how he knew exactly where to place the explosives for maximum damage, how he timed it to coincide with your wedding day, knowing you'd visit your special spot. But why come back? Lily asked. Why risk getting caught? Walsh turned to another image on her tablet, a screenshot, of an offshore account showing a balance of $12 million. This is what they'd already stolen from Westfield's clients using early versions of the backdoor, she explained. The account information was on the flash drive. Carl needed special passwords from Dawson to access it, and Dawson was refusing to provide them until Carl finished the job. So he came back to kill us again, Thomas said flatly. Yes, and to convince Dawson he was still committed to their plan. Walsh closed her tablet, but he made a critical mistake. He assumed you'd be alone when you came to the office. He wasn't expecting police protection. The weeks that followed brought a gradual return to normalcy. Carl and Dawson both faced multiple charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Thomas's company reputation had taken a hit, but with full transparency about what had happened and cooperation with Westfield to identify and close all the back doors, he was slowly rebuilding trust. Lily had returned to her freelance work, finding comfort in the familiar routine. 6 months after their wedding day, they finally took their postponed honeymoon to Italy. As they sat on a terrace in Positano, watching the sunset over the Mediterranean, Thomas raised his wine glass. To new beginnings, he said, and to the rest of our lives together. Lily clinked her glass against his. To surviving the impossible, Thomas pulled her close, grateful beyond words that they were both alive to see this sunset, to have this moment. Their wedding day had nearly been their last, but instead, it had become the first chapter in a story of survival, justice, and love that had proven stronger than the darkest betrayal. You know, Lily said thoughtfully, watching the golden light play across the water, when people ask how we met or about our wedding, we're going to have one hell of a story to tell. Thomas laughed, the sound free and unburdened for the first time in months. Just wait until we tell our kids someday. Our kids, Lily repeated, a smile spreading across her face. She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Maybe sooner than you think. Thomas's eyes widened as he understood her meaning. For a moment he couldn't speak, overcome with emotion. Really? He finally managed. Lily nodded, happy tears shining in her eyes. I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment to tell you. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Thomas and Lily held each other close, no longer defined by the tragedy they'd survived, but by the future they would build together. A future that, against all odds, they were alive to share.